The story opened on a stormy night at the Demon Lord's castle. Lightning flashed dramatically. Perfect timing for the Demon Lord to call forth his 4 generals: Almandra, the Flame Bearer; Sylphid, the Storm Conjurer; Gnomi, the Barrier Knight, and a special soul from another realm who would supposedly serve as the guardian deity of water. Much to everyone's surprise, this special soul turned out to be just an ordinary salaryman from Japan. No one could figure out how he ended up there, least of all the salaryman himself, Uchimura. In his previous life, Uchimura was that typical fresh college graduate who spent sleepless nights hunting for jobs. When he finally landed one, he worked tirelessly without ever earning any praise from his boss. His superior, fed up with what he saw as a useless employee, shipped him overseas to manage a factory construction project on his own. Against all odds, Uchimura actually pulled it off. But no sooner had he succeeded than his boss sent him to another country for the same gig. Feeling disheartened, Uchimura found himself in the middle of the street, questioning his very existence. Right before a rogue scooter, Scootikun, as he'd later call it, slammed into him from behind. Next thing he knew, he was in a fantasy world, face to face with the final boss, the Demon Lord. Normally, someone summoned to a fantasy world would be greeted by a radiant goddess or a handful of holy priestesses, given a fancy sword and told to go save the realm. Not Uchimura. He found himself listening to the Demon Lord's villainous monologue. The Demon Lord radiated an aura of malice, but got straight to the point. He wanted Uchimura to join his demon army as one of the Big Four. On top of that, he gave Uchimura the prestigious job title of Overseas Expatriate. Confused, Uchimura wondered why anybody would choose a loser like him when so many more qualified people existed. That was when the Demon Lord started rattling off Uchimura's hidden achievements. It turned out he had done a thorough background check, learned how hardworking Uchimura truly was, and decided this salaryman needed a proper boss who would appreciate him. Uchimura admitted it was nice to finally get some recognition, but he wasn't exactly jumping for joy at the thought of becoming a demon general. Before Uchimura could politely refuse, the Demon Lord mentioned a few enticing perks: a steady salary, authority matching a director's position, the freedom to pick his own subordinates, and a personalized office. He also assured Uchimura that if he still wanted to say no, he wouldn't hurt him. He would simply send him back to his old world, where Uchimura was technically supposed to be dead anyway. In a twist of irony, the Demon Lord's decent employee benefits and respectful attitude made Uchimura realize something. He might never get a boss this considerate again. And so, against all common sense, he found himself seriously contemplating a future under the Demon Lord's management. Uchimura recalls his bleak life on Earth. Neglected by everyone around him, he had convinced himself he wasn't good enough. With that mindset, he advised the Demon Lord to retract his offer. But the Demon Lord had no time for self-pity and dismissed Uchimura's doubts, calling those who overlooked his hard work fools, unworthy of a dedicated worker like him. Rising dramatically from his throne, the Demon Lord delivered a final impassioned speech. He promised Uchimura that together they would unlock his true potential and reach unimaginable heights. It was the kind of pitch that could sell sand in a desert. Before Uchimura could respond, Almandra, the fiery redhead, cut in, voicing her disbelief. She outright declared that a pathetic human had no place serving the almighty Demon Lord. So, Sylphid and Genome, ever the loyal yes-men, quickly chimed in to back her up. To settle the dissent, the Demon Lord proposed a test of Uchimura's abilities. Almandra, who clearly didn't listen to the part about testing, decided to skip straight to vaporizing him. She unleashed an energy wave that knocked Uchimura out cold, though she seemed ready to do far worse. The Demon Lord intervened just in time, stopping Almandra and revealing that Uchimura was in fact a powerless human. This raised an obvious question: why recruit a nobody to lead a demon army? The Demon Lord explained that Uchimura's intelligence was precisely what the Big Four lacked, especially in comparison to the walking disaster trio standing before him. Before the Demon Lord could elaborate further, Uchimura regained consciousness, begging for his life. "Please don't let me die at the hands of this pretty young lady," he pleaded. The Demon Lord calmed him down, explaining that his value lay not in physical strength, but in his sharp mind. He clarified that the test would be one of intelligence, not brute force. The Demon Lord laid out his current problem. Negotiations with the surrounding races, like the salamanders and werewolves, were failing due to a lack of competent negotiators. To prove himself worthy of the Big Four, Uchimura was tasked with gaining the Minotaur's trust and bringing them into the fold. For context, the previous negotiator was none other than Almandra, whose diplomacy skills were questionable. If Uchimura had any questions, he was advised to consult her before leaving. Reluctantly teaming up with Almandra, Uchimura followed her through the dungeon toward Lord Tarius, the Minotaur chief. As they walked, Almandra, ever the aggressive redhead, taunted him for his slow pace, calling him an old lady. She doubted he had any chance of passing the test, while Uchimura, though scared, clung to the Demon Lord's words about ignoring negativity. Motivated by the idea of working for someone who actually appreciated him, Uchimura resolved to give it his all. When they arrived at the enormous doors to Lord Tarius's chamber, Uchimura hesitated, intimidated by their sheer size. Sensing his fear, Almandra suggested he open them himself, casually mentioning that Minotaurs were known for trampling people flat. Uchimura briefly reconsidered his career choices, but was interrupted as Almandra flung the doors open. Bright light poured through the opening, and Uchimura, suppressing his dread, steeled himself for the challenge. Inside stood a towering Minotaur, its presence alone enough to make him imagine being squashed into a decorative rug. After a moment of silent panic, Uchimura gathered his courage and offered to handle the negotiation. Almandra, unimpressed, stepped forward, claiming she'd show him how a pro does it. At first, her approach seemed promising. She started calm and composed, making Uchimura think she might actually succeed. Then, as if flipping a switch, she began screaming at Lord Tarius. Within seconds, the two were yelling at the top of their lungs, the negotiation devolving into a full-blown shouting match. Uchimura quickly realized that Almandra's negotiation skills were about as refined as a screaming toddler's tantrum. After what felt like an eternity of back-and-forth delinquents, Lord Tarius finally kicked them both out of his chamber. Almandra, desperate to save face, confidently informed Uchimura that the negotiations had started off well, until Lord Tarius just kept saying no. She insisted it wasn't her fault. The Minotaur chief was simply too stubborn to see reason. Rolling his eyes internally, Uchimura let her rant about how hard-headed Tarius was. When she declared she'd done all she could and left him to take over, Uchimura decided to retreat and regroup. The angry roars echoing from Tarius's chamber were enough to convince him to step back and plan. But the terrifying image of the hulking Minotaur kept haunting him, making it nearly impossible to focus. Could he even reason with such a towering mass of muscle? To clear his head, Uchimura wandered into a bar and ordered a drink. As he sipped, memories of his past life resurfaced, particularly the time when his clients had repeatedly rejected his pitches. Back then, he'd learned the importance of persistence and finding common ground. Encouraged by the memory, he downed his drink, resolved to give it another shot, and headed straight back to the Minotaur's chamber. Meanwhile, Almandra marched into the Demon Lord's throne room, eager to report Uchimura's inevitable failure. She argued that choosing him was a mistake, but the Demon Lord, unbothered, told her to wait and see. Frustrated, but unable to argue further, she rushed back to Tarius's chamber, only to find Uchimura standing outside, stuffing hay into a sack. "What's with the trash?" she asked, sneering. "It's not trash," Uchimura replied calmly. "It's my secret weapon for the negotiation." Almandra rolled her eyes and declared that negotiating with Lord Tarius was a lost cause. But Uchimura, surprisingly composed, explained that negotiations weren't about size or strength, but about bridging the cognitive gap between two parties. "The key is eye contact," he added with a smirk, clutching his sack of hay like it was a bag of gold. Ignoring her skepticism, he strode confidently into Tarius's chamber. For the first time, Almandra saw a different side of Uchimura, bold, determined, and far from the quivering wreck she'd met earlier. The next morning, she barged into Tarius's chamber, fully expecting to find Uchimura flattened like a welcome mat. Instead, she found the room in chaos, hay scattered everywhere. Assuming the worst, she groaned, "I knew this would happen." But Uchimura, looking annoyingly calm, informed her that Lord Tarius was already with the Demon Lord, finalizing their merger agreement. Her jaw hit the floor. How had he managed to pull this off in one night? Uchimura explained with a sly grin. Lord Terius was always open to negotiation. He just kept saying no to mess with you. He wanted to see how you'd handle rejection, but every time you stormed out, he figured you weren't serious. Moments later, Lord Terius himself approached them, apologizing to Almandra for his rudeness and thanking Uchimura for his tact. He extended his massive hand for a handshake, a gesture that nearly broke Uchimura's wrist but cemented his success. Having pulled off this incredible feat, Uchimura returned to the Demon Lord, who was all too happy to welcome him as an official member of the Big Four. The Demon Lord presented him with a golden bracelet, symbolizing his new role as the overseas expatriate of the Demon Army. Almandra, while grudgingly impressed, still made it clear she had doubts about his long-term abilities. But there was no time for doubts. More negotiations awaited. Uchimura and Almandra, now reluctantly teamed up, headed off to tackle the next challenge. Watching them depart, the Demon Lord smiled. He was confident that with their combined efforts, his army would soon reach unparalleled strength.
The next day, Uchimura is still adjusting to his new role as a general in the Demon King's army. He finds it hard to believe that he, once an average employee, now works directly for the Demon King and even has his own office. As he reviews the nation's structure, he notices that, although small, it is well organized. Determined to live up to the trust the Demon King placed in him, Uchimura resolves to do his best. While lost in thought, he opens a window and accidentally lets in several demonic bats, causing him to scream in fear. Deciding to adapt to his new environment, Uchimura introduces some etiquette rules and makes an effort to get to know his colleagues. He visits the room of Sylphid, the Storm Archmage, but is greeted by her secretary Belinda, who informs him that Sylphid is away but promises to pass on his message. Not discouraged, Uchimura remembers a business lesson: to keep moving forward after setbacks. He plans to visit another general, but is interrupted by Almandra, who informs him that the Demon King has summoned him for a new mission. Upon meeting the Demon King, Uchimura learns that his task is to negotiate an alliance with the Ogre clan. The Demon King explains that the demonic army is still growing and needs alliances with semi-human clans to strengthen their position. The Ogres, a powerful and dominant faction, could be key allies, but their relationship with the demons has been strained. End of Chapter 9. The Ogres have imposed strict information control and might view the demons with hostility. The Demon King likens this task to negotiating with a competitor and believes Uchimura, as a human, is uniquely suited to handle it. Almandra agrees to accompany Uchimura on this mission, though she playfully expresses worry about his involvement. She insists they will work together as great generals. Uchimura hopes to consult Gnome, the leader of the semi-human forces, for valuable insights about the ogres. However, when they visit the semi-humans, Almandra refuses to join him, claiming she needs to check the carriage. Uchimura suspects her actions might stem from jealousy, but agrees it's better to divide tasks. Observing the semi-human soldiers train, Uchimura is impressed by their precision with bows and spears, and the high morale of the troops. Their commander, Earthcrest Barrier, praises their progress and grants them a well-deserved break. Uchimura realizes how skilled and disciplined the semi-humans are. The gnome approaches and asks about Uchimura's visit. After learning about the mission, she warns him about Ugure, the ogre leader, describing him as a brave but audacious ruler who is seen as a dictator by his enemies. Frankatex hates the Iteng. Gnome also expresses annoyance at Almandra, who suddenly appears behind Uchimura, shocking him. Almandra, feigning concern, insists she was only checking on her travel companion and hurries him to leave. As the two bicker, Uchimura reflects on their tense relationship. Upon arriving at the ogre's castle, they are made to wait at the entrance. Almandra grows impatient, but the guards explain that only the chief can grant them entry, even though they are high-ranking generals. Uchimura, seeing this delay as a psychological tactic to unsettle them, advises patience. However, Almandra loses her temper and unleashes her immense power, frightening the ogres. a local representative arrives to apologize for the delay and escorts them inside. As they enter, Uchimura carefully observes his surroundings, noting details that might help with the negotiation. However, Almandra warns him not to look around too much, as it might be interpreted as a sign of weakness. The ogres, a powerful clan, are known for their strength rivaling the Demon Lord's army. But Uchimura knew the real problem wasn't their might. It was their leader, Oguru, a complicated and unpredictable individual. Guided to a massive gate, Uchimura felt a drop of sweat fall as anxiety crept in. He had no idea what to expect. Inside, they met the ogre clan leader, Oguru. Almandra started explaining the purpose of their visit, but Oguru interrupted, ordering her to speak only when given permission. Uchimura noticed his colleague struggling to keep her cool, knowing she had a short temper. Then Oguru mocked them, asking if the demons had come to surrender, and demanded the Demon Lord's head as the only condition for peace. Hearing this, Almandra nearly lost control, but Uchimura calmly held her wrist and asked Oguru for time to consider. Once they stepped away from the meeting, Almandra vented her frustration. Uchimura explained that Oguru's goal was to provoke them into losing their temper and sabotage the negotiations, putting the blame on them. He reminded her that showing anger could give the ogre leader an excuse to align with other nations against the Demon King's army. While they pondered their next move, their guide introduced herself as Olulu, Oguru's daughter. Despite Almandra's suspicions, Olulu revealed her intention to overthrow her father, believing the demon army could help save the ogres. She led them to the castle's food storage, which was empty. Olulu explained that the ogres, once influential over neighboring clans, were now in financial trouble. Uchimura had already noticed signs of this. The soldiers' poor equipment and the lifeless state of the castle resembled a company on the verge of bankruptcy. Olulu tried to counter the argument of the soldiers. The land was trashed and burned, but with treason they could get by. Ulu shared that her father's illness was behind the clan's secrecy and poor decisions. She feared the clan would fall apart if he died suddenly. Moved by her concern but wary of her openness, Uchimura advised caution, warning her about revealing internal matters so freely. Ulu, confident in her ability to judge character, proposed a bold solution. Uchimura should marry her and become the new clan chief. Almandra, feeling jealous, interrupted and asked for time to think about the proposal. Later, Uchimura reflected on the situation. A conversation with Almandra about pride and teamwork gave him a breakthrough idea. Determined, he straightened his tie and promised to resolve the matter. The next day, he reported progress to Almandra, setting a plan in motion. A week later, they met Oguru again, who demanded to know why other races were joining the Demon King's army. Uchimura smiled, revealing his strategy. Before approaching Oguru, he had recruited nearby clans to join the demons. His victory was his glorious way of marking his political achievement. By doing this, the ogres couldn't ignore the growing alliance of their neighbors. He compared this tactic to his past experience in business, approaching small and medium-sized companies first to attract the attention of larger corporations. Uchimura argued that the neighboring clans were struggling financially and that joining the Demon King would ensure stability and a minimum standard of living. The sisters then entered into business together. Oguru, growing irritated, declared himself the rightful ruler of the lands. Uchimura knew this was the moment he had been waiting for. Provoking the leader into losing his composure weakened his position in the negotiation, and if he lost his composure in the solution of a complex problem, the war would probably be lost. But if he stayed doubtful, he could manage the issue. To escalate the tension, Uchimura revealed that Olulu had been involved in the negotiations with the neighboring clans. Overwhelmed, Olulu admitted that her father's stubbornness and declining health were dragging the clan down. Crying, she confessed her admiration for her father's strength, but acknowledged that they needed help to survive. Ukumura proposed an alliance, not an annexation. This phrasing preserved the ogre's pride while achieving the same result, a partnership where both sides benefited equally. Knowing that language mattered to a proud leader like Oguru, Ukumura carefully framed his offer. Oguru asked for time to consider the proposal. As they left, Ogura watched his daughter depart and quietly acknowledged that times were changing. Days later, Almandra informed Uchimura that Oguru had agreed to the deal. Meanwhile, Uchimura focused on appointing a subordinate, as instructed by the Demon King. Though he couldn't choose Almandra, she seemed pleased by this limitation. Olulu arrived as her clan's representative to formalize the alliance. After Uchimura's departure, Oguru began delegating management tasks to capable members of the clan, improving their situation. Grateful for Uchimura's help, Olulu expressed her willingness to assist him in any way. Uchimura invited her to work with him, recognizing her potential. Reflecting on the outcome, Uchimura noted that while the demon army had grown stronger, every success came with risks. He remained determined to lead them forward, no matter the challenges. The wizard's understanding was that nothing would replace them, regardless of the loss of their partner. It was better than prison life, and much worse. Summary: Uchimura faces his toughest challenge yet, negotiating an alliance with the ogres, a powerful but struggling clan. Using his business acumen and strategic thinking, he recruits neighboring clans to pressure the proud ogre leader Oguru into joining forces. Plot develops. By proposing an equal partnership rather than an annexation, Uchimura secures the alliance while maintaining the ogre's dignity. His clever tactics and ability to stay calm under pressure solidify his role as a key figure in the Demon King's growing army. That brings an end to episode 2. Thanks for watching.